Happy National Ice Cream Month, everyone. This is Greg, and here are the podcast episodes that will be dripping down the side of your hand in the month of July 2022. Don't forget to put a scoop of vanilla next to your slice of cake when Popping Collars celebrates its 8th birthday this month. We're taking a look back at our top 10 most downloaded episodes of the pod while blowing out our candles. I have dug into some smooth musical soft serve on the latest PC Music Diary when I discuss the sultry symphony of Soul Sacrifice by Carlos Santana. Betsy and I continue on our rocky road through the movies of 30 years ago on Going on 30. Next up is an all-time summer favorite, Point Break. Finally, we begin a new journey on the Sacred Six where I chronicle my trip on the Camino de Santiago. I kick things off with a pre-trip conversation with special guest Ryan Parker about what every pilgrim should know before they take their first step and whether I should maybe leave my pint of Ben & Jerry's back home. You're listening to Popping Collars, the podcast Sunday that adds extra sprinkles, extra peanuts, and extra collars popped with a cherry on top.
Come on, ladies, it's time to stand up. All right, fellas, take away your drum cut.
Welcome back to a brand new Sacred Six. Sometimes an item in pop culture is just too big for one podcast episode. That's where this show steps in. I'm your host, Greg Knight. With me is a very special guest. We used to have him on the show all the time back in the old days. Now he supplies us with all the amazing interviews we've set up over the last couple of years. Give a hearty Popping Collars welcome back to Ryan Parker.
Hey, thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me. It's fun to see you. Is this our first conversation since 2020?
I'm trying to think. Like, I know that we talked. What was it? We talked about the Mr. Rogers documentary that came out. Gosh, was that the last time? Like,
maybe. I think that may have been 2019.
That was a ways ago. That was back in the Movie Pass days where I was at the movie theater all the time.
Did you see somebody was trying to revive Movie Pass?
Oh no!
And it made me think of that old Arrested Development line. Did you watch Arrested Development season, like the first season where Tobias is proposing getting in an open marriage, and he says, "Oh," and somebody asks me, he says, "Open marriages never work, but this one might."
Nice. Yeah, you're going to have to definitely work on the branding of Movie Pass if you try to revive that. That's for sure. Hey, Ryan, catch our audience up on where you are these days and what you're up to.
Well, the one I'm up to is still fairly much the same, working on marketing and publicity, promoting content to streaming and theatrical content to, educators, faith influencers, social justice workers, just whatever the film or series, the themes of the film or series demand, we try to pair that with an audience that's kind of doing that work in the world, or who, writers and podcasters like yourself who really enjoy analyzing and talking about, good, thoughtful content. So that's still pretty much the same. And then my wife and I recently moved to Mississippi after about 17 years in California. So we are rolling with the culture shock and the shock waves. But it's all good. We're originally from here, but like I said, it's been a long time since we've lived here. Thankfully, we have some good friends and family who are still in the area, so it's helped make the transition a little bit easier. But that's been maybe 2 or 3 weeks, been kind of the consuming focus, if you will. But work is slowly coming back. So,
okay, all right, here we go. I brought Ryan on the show because this is going to be a Sacred Six, unlike any we've done so far. So, in the past, this series of the pod has been about catching up with pop culture that we didn't discuss on the main show. But as I said before, it was just too big to spend one episode breaking down. So we've talked about things like Star Trek, the Beatles, Major League Baseball, etc. This time, we're going to be doing an audio travel journal as I finally embark on my long-delayed pilgrimage on the Camino de Santiago next month. And I probably just jinxed it by saying that out loud. So I asked Ryan to be my first guest on this series because he's actually already made this trip. So Ryan, let's start at the beginning. Simple question. What is the Camino de Santiago and when did you make your journey on it?
So it's a centuries long pilgrimage from Saint Jean in the southwest of France in the Pyrenees, to Santiago, right? In Spain, on the western side of Spain, about 30 miles from the coast, is it? 30 to 50 miles from the coast. Numbers are going to escape me. And it's a pilgrimage that Christians have long taken to commemorate, to celebrate, to venerate the life of St. James. Increasingly, what would you think, maybe in the last 50 to 100 years, the act of intentional pilgrimage has declined, but that doesn't mean that the act of the journey or the number of participants on the journey have declined. In fact, it's still an extremely popular event, task that people take from around the world for a host of reasons, from the traditional pilgrimage, right, which Catholic journey there, to a deeply spiritual quest, journey, process that people of all faiths have undertaken. And again, I want to reiterate, people from all over the world. So my wife and I, of course, if you grow up in a certain type of church, obviously, if you've been to seminary and taken church history, you're aware of the act of pilgrimage. So, I have long known about that journey, but our decision to do it, to undertake it, or, as we first started talking about it being a reality, was maybe in 2017. I would have to go back and look at the dates, but obviously, like a lot of people, we had seen the film The Way from Martin Sheen.
You should fly with me. Come on, a father-son trip. It'll be fun.
Yeah, right. Most people don't have the luxury of just picking up and leaving it all behind, Daniel.
We agreed that if I let you take me to the airport, you wouldn't lecture me about how I'm ruining my life.
I lied. Hello.
Are you the father of Daniel Avery?
He was walking the road to Santiago de Compostela, 800 kilometers on the northwestern coast of Spain. This is everything he had when we found him. People have walked the path for over 1,000 years. The way is a very personal journey, Mr. Avery.
Daniel was my only child. We're gonna walk the Camino de Santiago, both of us.
Tom, this is the way.
Hi, I'm Joost. There's no mystery why I'm doing this trick. Oh, look at cheesemakers. Hola. Hey, Tom, wait. Yeah, you should try some.
No, thanks.
Tom! Tom, it's me! Wait, I'm from Amsterdam.
Dutch, huh?
What are you looking to score?
I love this guy.
It wears off quick, I promise.
Hello, I'm Jack from Ireland.
How long have you been out here?
On the Camino or on this particular spot?
You pick.
Well, geez, it's hard to say.
So what is it, on pilgrimage to change your life?
Something like that.
That box with the ashes.
My son.
That's brilliant. I mean, tragic, of course, but brilliant.
Oh, no!
Tom, your son. I am so sorry. I had no idea.
My son was almost 40.
Yeah, but he'll always be your baby.
What was your son like?
Smart, confident, stubborn. Pissed me off a lot. Was a lot like you. Hey, that kid took my bag. Hey! Hey! You can keep the pack! Just give me the box!
You don't choose a life, Dad. You live one.
But you can do this on a bike? Why the hell are we walking?
Highly recommend that film. But even then, having watched that, I think maybe we watched that and said, oh, it'd be cool to do that one day. And then I was approached by, in the work that we do in marketing and publicity, by a team of filmmakers, producers, and directors who were making a documentary called I'll Push You, which is about two best friends who undertook the Camino. And what's interesting about their story is that one of the friends lives in a wheelchair. He has an ALS type disease that has him living in a wheelchair, and they had heard about or encountered the Camino in some way, and he said, I want to do that. It would be so cool to do that. And his friend said, then I'll push you. And then working with those guys, getting to know them, around that time, my father had been diagnosed with cancer in 2015, I believe it was, and then would go on and eventually die in early 2018. And I think before that, and as he was getting sicker, Amy and I said, we really want to do this. Or maybe we said, we're going to do this after he died. And so we embarked in August of 2018. And listen, people undertake this pilgrimage, which is traditionally a walking pilgrimage, but you see people bike it, you see people run it. You see people pulling carts with their pets on the carts, so it's all walks and styles.
Horseback is an acceptable pilgrimage. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The why of doing the pilgrimage is a big one, right? So you talked before about the movies and stuff, and that's the thing. Like the Camino Frances, which is the really popular Camino, because there are a lot of like different routes into Santiago. There's the Camino Portuguese, the Camino Inglés, the Camino del Norte. But the most famous one is the Camino Frances because it was featured in The Way, because it was featured on, what was it? There was like a BBC documentary, I think, that featured it in the 90s. And so you see like this explosion of pilgrimage in like the 90s and 2000s, especially with like English people and Americans and Catholics who were prompted by Pope John Paul II to embrace pilgrimage, like at the turn of the millennium. So I understand like the why of it from like a religious standpoint, this idea of like walking, sort of emptying yourself out, visiting these churches, waiting to be filled up again with something spiritual. But like you said, this is a diverse crowd of people from all over the world. And so I'm wondering, like, in your experience walking this trail, what were the stories that you heard about why people were doing it? For you, it sounds like kind of a threshold moment of we're going from one phase of our life to another. But like, what else did you hear as far as like why people do this?
There were responses from, it's just a challenge. Mm-hmm. It's a thing to do. The other is a lot of the things that we heard were, I love the opportunity of meeting new people in this way, because this is a really good question, actually, because it gets at, I think, at least for Amy and I, and we love to travel, and travel has been a foundational part of our relationship. We met while we were traveling. We have traveled extensively as a married couple, and it's a big part of who we want to be. And because of the ability to encounter new cultures and meet new people, to get out of our comfort zone, all those kind of standard things that people say about why they like to travel, which for me are profoundly spiritual things.
Yeah.
And whether or not people would use those words on the Camino, because increasingly people who undertake the Camino may not indeed be religious,
right?
But they would say that it is a deeply spiritual experience for them, and the act of encountering new and different people is that. So we heard a lot of that. We did meet a few people for whom it was a specifically religious practice. Mm-hmm. And then the people who, especially the people who we had met before, who had done the Camino, and I think you could probably relate to some of this, even though, as you've told me before, you've done some of this in bits and pieces.
Right.
It is a very addictive thing. Mm-hmm. Where, I mean, as soon as we finished, we said, how quickly can we go again?
Right.
And life hasn't given us that time, but it's something that I know, life permitting, I would do again in a heartbeat.
So there are three questions I desperately want to ask you. The first one is, when did you want to quit on the way? Because I imagine there was a day where you definitely wanted to quit?
Day one. Not really. You know, I'm no prime athlete, you know, but
you didn't find yourself staring at the horizon in the Meseta thinking, I'm not making any progress.
I'm going to tell you that people warned us about that, which to people listening, that's the kind of a desert portion of the walk where it's flat and some might say boring, but I found it oddly hypnotic. No, you know, that first day was really tough because we would see a sign and we weren't used to walking quite that far, right? I mentioned before that we'd done some hikes and stuff, but leading up to it. But that day felt very long. Mm. And I think if I had to do over again, there's a small village that's just less than halfway. I mean, you maybe walk 5 or 6 miles, but the accommodations are sparse. You hadn't really walked that far, but that was a tough day. And I won't, you know, if Amy were here, she would, I feel comfortable telling the story. I think it was the second day she really talked about quitting and kind of had a bit of a cry, and then woke up the next morning, right as rain, ready to go. And she admitted to it, knowing that she was going to have that moment. And I would have appreciated some heads up, but you know, I don't know that I ever really did want to quit. There were 1 or 2 days where I said, okay, the end can't get here quick enough.
Yeah.
Because I was just so tired, so beat up. And then for the rest of the time, man, and we also lucked out too. I have to tell you, it rained on us for 5 minutes one morning. And then other than that, we had blue skies the whole way. Yes.
Wow.
And it was warm to start, but after about the first week, it started cooling off. I don't know that we could have asked for better weather on that whole trip. And I know that is a huge factor in people's experience and enjoyment of the trail.
Especially day one, going up over the Pyrenees in mud is no bueno.
No.
Okay, second question. What was the most amazing thing that happened to you on the trail? What's the story of the most amazing thing that happened?
This is probably the easy answer to say when we finished. As we walked into Santiago and we saw all these people converge and in the square and people celebrating, and I get chills now thinking about it. That was pretty cool. I have to admit that we had accomplished that. And I always for a long time in my life, I had talked about getting a tattoo, and I would talk about it and not get it because I'm a wimp when it comes to my pain threshold. And, but you see, you know, the Camino symbol is a rough outline of a shell. Mm-hmm. And I realized after the third or fourth day, I told Amy, I'm going to get that tattoo if we finish. And for my dad, for us, you know, the whole thing. And we got to Santiago, went to the cathedral, looked around, took a shower, and I went and got a tattoo. And that was pretty amazing. And but the other experience, I would say one of the most amazing things is I got, and I don't know if you need to edit this out, but I got very drunk in Logroño with some Irish pilgrims one night. And it was so much fun. They were older. They were probably in their 60s or 70s. And these guys went hard. That's all I'm saying. But we had so much fun and had great food. Oh, and then pinchos in anywhere along the way. Mm-hmm. Food. I love food. So discovering that kind of the pincho streets in different towns like Logroño, Pamplona, Leon, getting to those towns and just being able to gorge yourself. But really, in all honesty, I think really finishing when just that experience of it's kind of like you round a corner and there it is.
Yeah.
And it's
fascinating because I've done the last 100 kilometers of the Camino, which I imagine for you was like a nightmare because all of a sudden, like here descends like all these newbies, like right at the end.
And tour buses. And the tour buses are just everywhere.
Yeah. But what I remember about that trip into Santiago is that once you hit the city limits, like you still have a little ways to go before you get to the cathedral. And I remember walking with there was a group of college girls that we were walking beside, and we hit that Santiago de Compostela sign like right outside the city that everybody takes their picture with. and they were like cheering and like, "Hey, we did it, we did it!" And there was this old man who was walking like at the same time, who had like his stick and the whole deal, like classic Pilgrim, and he just like points towards the middle of the city, and he's like, "Ultreya." It's like,
ain't done yet.
Still have a ways to go. Ultreya meaning keep going, right?
Yeah.
You still have a ways to go. And I can imagine, like, if you've done that whole thing, like this feeling of like excitement and melancholy at walking through the city, knowing that it's about to end, but you're also about to get there. Yeah.
It's bittersweet. It really is. And, another thing I keep going back, it's just like talking about the most amazing things that happen to you. It's just people sharing their stories and the vulnerability. Again, like I said, meeting people is different. People are more raw. I think people are more open. And then just, it is a struggle. It's a journey. And you can be as ascetic as you want to be, right? You can camp out. You can stay in albergues in a church gym with a parish hall with like 50 other people. We never did that. And I wonder what that's like now post-COVID. But it is also a very nourishing experience in a sense of, if you walk, say 10 to 12 miles, you can always find a pilgrim meal, which people will be shocked is a 3-course meal and a bottle of wine for 10 or 12 bucks.
Mm-hmm.
And you need that at the end of the day, right? Because that's the biggest thing you eat. You try to eat light in the morning and at lunch. And the food is usually very good. Then you go to a place like Pamplona or Leon or wherever, and you can have the opportunity, say for 1, 2, or 3 nights on the journey, to really find some nice food, and you really value that, right? That means more after you've walked and you kind of earned that, and then the conversations that you have with people around the table, and those, we look forward to those every day.
Yeah. All right. Third question, and this one's for me. This is a selfish one. What do you wish you had known before you did the Camino back in the day?
That's a really good question. I think the easy answer is trail running shoes, not boots. That's the easiest one for me. What else do I wish I would have known? That the first week was going to be harder. Most people said, the first 2 days are the hardest, and then it gets easier. And that's just not, I didn't find that true from my experience, because in a real way, you're in the Pyrenees for about a week. I mean, as they descend, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most accomplished walkers or trail runners will tell you downhill is much harder than uphill, and walk in zigzag fashion, not straight down. I think I almost blew out a knee on the second day because I wasn't zigging and zagging as much as I should have. Let's see. Don't be afraid to wear socks and sandals while you walk. That was a big, next time I do it, I'll be shod differently.
Would you do a different Camino next time, you think?
I think so. I mean, the Portuguese route, it seems appealing to me for the views, and the port. But I think, I don't know, I would love to do the Francaise one more time.
Yeah.
Maybe devoid of any technology. Completely disconnected, which is not safe. Maybe just a cell phone for emergencies, not a smartphone, like a satellite phone or something.
I was about to say, it's hard to find public phones out there.
Yeah.
Like old pay phones.
Yeah. But that was, I would do a different one. Maybe not the Norte. I've heard too many challenging descriptions.
Pretty remote. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty gnarly. Fewer accommodations. A lot more camping. I'm not carrying a tent or a sleeping bag. Are you going to share your journey? Where can we follow you, or are you going to go radio silent?
I'm going to go radio silent. So my journey, You'll be able to follow along with on this podcast over the next 6 months. The next time up, I'll be sort of reporting audio from my trip through Basque country in Navarra. So that's going to be the next section of trail that you'll hear me on, and I'll be talking to my companions along the way. I'll probably be cursing the Pyrenees when I get to Roncesvalles. We'll have to see how it goes. But each stage of the journey will be chronicling. And maybe I'll bring you back on at the very end after it's all over. And
I can interview you. We'll do. You can just turn over the mic and the list of questions.
Yeah, exactly. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on.
Always. Thanks.
Camino prep episode, and next month we'll see you on the train.
Safe travels. Buen Camino.
But I would walk 500 miles and I would walk 500 more to be the man who walked 1,000 miles to fall down at your door. But I'm walking, 'cause I know I'm gonna be the man.